Namaste. Welcome to the third edition of the Global Festival of Oneness, organized by Advaita Academy. We will start with a prayer. Sada Shiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru-Paramparam. We are very pleased to have with us Dr. Vinayachandra Banavathy, who is going to talk to us about Shankara, an embodiment of synthesis. Before we start the talk, I'd like to introduce the speaker. Vinay is the director of Indica Yoga, a platform that offers authentic, transformative yoga experiences across the world. He holds a PhD in the psychological insights in the Vedas from Pondicherry University, besides masters in Sanskrit, English, yogic science, and applied psychology. Vinay is a dedicated teacher who travels across the world conducting courses, lectures, and workshops on a unique blend of yoga, psychology, and Sanskrit. He is a guest faculty resource person at various universities and yoga association, including Ghent University, Belgium, Zurich University of Applied Sciences, Vedanta Academy, Belgium, Irish Yoga Association. His publications include a report on standardization of yoga terminologies for WHO, a book co-edited with Dr. Anuradha Chaudhary titled Perspectives on Indian Psychology, published by Jain University Press, and another book co-authored titled Happiness, Indic Perspectives. Welcome, Vinay.
Namaste. Thank you, Anuradha ji, for this generous introduction. Before I start, I would also like to express my gratitude to my dear friend Nitin for this opportunity, and also congratulate him and his team at Indica Moksha for curating a program of this order. I think it's the third year in the sequence, and it's been extraordinary success with curating such wonderful programs year on year, reaching out to so many scholars from India and across, and yet put together such a beautiful garland of thoughts, feelings, emotions, salutations to none other than Adi Shankara. So I once again congratulate the entire team for conceiving a program like this. So thank you, Nitin, for giving us these kinds of sessions and programs, and many congratulations to the entire team. Before I start, just like to start with a prayer. Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru-Paramparam Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpada Shankaram Loka Shankaram. Sabhaye Namaha, Sabhasabhyo Namaha. Speaking about Shankara, one is often reminded of the sayings of Kalidasa. In Raghuvamsha, he says, Urdhva-bhavuhu viromyesha. I am a dwarf trying to reach out to the fruit that is there on the tree. It is so high. First of all, the tree is high. It's such a delicious fruit. And I stand here in the form of Vamana, a dwarf who has this high ambition to reach out to that fruit. I think that would be the case 1,000-fold. If Kalidasa says this about the Raghuvamsha, the kings of the Raghu clan, I mean, what else can a person like me or us can say about while speaking about Acharya Shankara. The kind of work that he has done, the legacy that he has left behind, the transformation that he brought about in the human psyche is incomprehensible. We try to reach out to it through parts. We understand this part, that part, and try to put them together, make a synthesis, so to say, in our own ways. But yet, what lies there is much beyond our cognitive capabilities. One has to just immerse into the thought of Shankara, more than immerse, it's just to take refuge in that thought and enjoy what one person could do, what one person could think through, how one person could institutionalize things which still hold such great value even after nearly 1,200 years. We have a word in Sanskrit, Yuga Pravartaka, Yuga Krit. And these words describe the work that Shankaracharya did. I don't see any other better person who can have this kind of a title called Yuga Pravartaka, one who can bring in a completely new dawn, which holds good after even a millennium, right? In an age that we are in, where change is the only constant thing, when things change every day, every moment, right? Yet there are some ideas, some thoughts, they just do not hold historical value. There are many people who have left us behind with good thoughts, which are valuable in terms of history. At some point in time, they came up with this idea and therefore it is great, right? But that is not the case with Acharya Shankara. What he has left behind is something that is relevant for today, will stay relevant even after 100,000 years. We will still find it difficult to comprehend the essence of the entire Vedic tradition that he has put forth so succinctly in the form of the Advaita Vedantic thought. Though he is well known for Advaita Vedantic thought, this is not the only one aspect that he has to be revered for. That's why I thought, let me take up a closely related but not so thought about aspect of his persona as a synthesizer. If you really have to identify one person who could bring together multiple strands in multiple domains at multiple levels into one fold, that has to be Shankara. I don't think there is any parallel to Acharya Shankara when it comes to be a synthesizer. Let me go with a few examples from various aspects, right? Just to speak about, you need to understand the time in which he came in. Again, before I go to the details, let me add this caveat. At the moment, I'm not bothered. I don't want to bother myself with the details of the debates of his historicity. Though most of them place him at 8th century, there are such versions which place him around in the BC era. I'm not getting into details. That is immaterial for this discussion. In a similar way, there is a lot of debate as to the kind of compositions or the writings that he has come up. While people largely agree, scholars largely agree that the bhashyas, the commentaries on the 3 texts have been authored by him. But when it comes to other texts and the other stotra sahitya, there is a lot of debate whether he has written, he has composed, or someone else in the name of Shankara has composed. This, again, discussion is immaterial for my presentation. And I'll also say it why. If someone has to come up with a composition like that, It has to have a certain background, and no one else can give us a background or a framework like Acharya Shankara does. I'll substantiate my views as we go along, right? Just we need to understand the time he came in. At the time, whatever, as I said, the AD, BC, keeping that discussion aside, he came in a period where there was a lot of, I'm a little hesitant to use this word degradation, but nevertheless, I'll use this. In the ways the society stood for certain things, the way it behaved in certain domains, there was a lot of chaos, transition that were happening at that period. Just to explain it further, if you look into the Vedic outpourings that are there right from the Vedic period, the way the gods have been described, the way these forces, whether Indra, Agni, Varuna, Vayu, all these forces are described, and the way it turned out to be at his time, there is a huge difference. For a Vedic seer, it was a spontaneous overflow of emotion and devotion connected to that force. That force was at the same time both the force outside in the nature as well as a representative of the inner world. So it was a very spontaneous connection the Vedic seer had. And while he could see the multitude of these forces, at the same time, he was equally certain that these are the forces of one central being. And what is that one central being? And that one central being is none other than one's own pure existence. Such was the connection a Vedic seer had. That's why you can see the proclamations. Ekam sat vipraha bahudha vadanti. Vipraha bahudha vadanti kintu ekam sat. The truth, the reality, the being, the substance is one alone. Vipraha bahudha vadanti. The wise call it by many names. What are the many names? Indra, Yama, Matarishva, Varuna. The list can go on. You can add as many names as you want as you go along, right? So that being the case, that was the experience of a Vedic seer. For him, when he invoked the name of Indra or Yama or Varuna, that was a sort of completing one's own circuit within. Indra represented a force. Agni represented the human will. Like that, each one of these forces which were there outside also were equally known for their presence and experience inside. So a Rishi could connect to these ideas, and that's why he could indulge himself in such kind of rapturous praisings of these forces, right? But over a period of time, the internal forces got more and more externalized, or the internal aspect was forgotten and external aspect took its own glory. There's no problem with that. But when you forget one domain, one dimension, and choose only one and take it to another extreme, that could be problematic. And Shankara arrived in the scene at that moment. If you look historically, there were multiple strands of people who had, multiple lineages which worshipped different forces and were known for those particular worships, and they went to the extent of negating the other, fighting with the other. The tendencies that we find in theistic religions, that too the monotheistic religions, somehow started to creep in. Somehow, somewhere people call this the situation that was prevalent as polytheism, but there is some problem in that nomenclature too. Nevertheless, keeping that aside, so you had people who worshipped the Shakti called as Shaktas. You had people who worshipped Shiva, the Shaivas, then you had the Vaishnavas, then you had the Ganapatyas, and then you had the Saura. So each one of these peoples, each one of these traditions were so different, and they were all almost becoming more and more exclusive. I shudder to think that we could also have gone in the ways of monotheistic religion. It is not difficult. It's not possible in this soil because of the inherent thought of the Vedas and the Upanishads, but you can never vouch for human folly, right? So we don't know if that could have happened, but at that time, we see the arrival of Shankara, right? You have on one side the loftiest ideas of the Vedas and the Upanishads, and on the other side, you see the forces have been completely externalized, and not just externalized, also behaving and acting in exclusivist ways. So what do? How do you bring these together? It can happen only with the genius of Shankara. And exclusively because of the Advaita philosophy that you can reconcile things together, right? So the first thing that he did was to firmly establish through his commentaries on the main texts which were revered by all, that is Upanishads, largely the 10 Upanishads, and then the Bhagavad Gita and the Brahma Sutra, writing detailed commentaries and establishing without any sort of doubt, without any sort of ambiguity as to what is the essential teaching of the Vedas. Not that this was completely forgotten, but I don't think anyone else had brought it out as clearly, as unambiguously as possible, the original truth of the Vedas, Ekam Sat. And therefore, even the popularizing of the name Advaita, right? What we get to experience is Dvaita. There's no doubt about it. No one is negating one's experience, but reality is not confined to my experience. Reality lays beyond the realms of my experience, and going there is what is the end of my life, the pursuit of my life, that is towards Advaita. And that he established through 3 approaches. Of course, again, none of these are completely new. They were there in the tradition, but the way he laid them out, I think you have to give the credit to Shankara. See here again how he brings in the synthesis. After taking a few examples, I'll go to the larger theory I'm presenting. He uses 3 levels: Shruti, Yukti, and Anubhuti. Shruti is the Vedic support, or the basing your argument on the teachings of the Vedas or the declarations of the Vedas. Anything that one has to prove has to be substantiated by the Vedic teachings or the Vedas themselves. So this is Shruti. But is that the be all and end all of arriving at the truth? No. The second one is Yukti, using of one's own intellect, also knowing its strength and its limitations, right? That is the Yukti aspect. And the third one is Anubhuti. Anubhuti, finally, it should culminate in one's experience. When all the 3 are aligned, whatever you arrive at is placed without any ambiguity. You don't need any other substantiation to say that. And that is the gist of approach of Shankara through these 3 commentaries: Shruti, Yukti, and Anubhuti. Throughout his commentary, he profusely uses Vedic statements to substantiate the point that he is making, right? Just to give an example, wherever it comes across, say, Tantu Auparisham Purusham Prichami, somewhere he quotes. So he's saying something and immediately has a quote for it from the Vedic source. But that is not enough. he also uses the heights of his intelligence, the razor edge of his reasoning to bring out the same truth very effective manner. In the initial commentary to the Brahma Sutra, that is a beautiful text in itself. Okay, there is an Upodghata and a brief introduction, followed by the commentary to the first 4 sutras, and that whole section is called Chatussutri. And just that part is enough if you have to really get a taste of what Shankara has to offer. And if you look at the entire Brahma Sutra text, or even the Chatussutri, the initial part, you will see how he takes the capacity of reasoning to its logical ends, to its heights. I mean, the entire Brahma Sutra is nothing but using the sharpest edges of a razor to cut the views which are not good enough, which don't hold the test of reasoning, right? That entire text is devoted for this. So that is an outcome of the effort of Yukti. But in that same text, he quotes profusely, and he also in the first part itself, in the Upodghata itself, he uses this term. What does he say? Anubhava avasanatvat bhuta vishayatvat brahmajnanasya. I'll just take these 2 words. Anubhava avasanatvat brahmajnanasya. See the way he's coining the words. Brahmajnanasya, the knowledge of Brahman, or the knowledge of the ultimate, was what is its logical end? Where does it need to reach? Anubhava avasana. It has to culminate in one's experience. If this knowledge does not culminate in one's experience, what is the use of that knowledge? Right? It's not just for an intellectual pursuit. It has to culminate in one's experience, and only then it becomes complete. This is the approach that he takes in all his commentaries without any failure, right? See how he synthesizes Shruti, that is reverence, to the statements of the sages. The bhakti aspect, the Shraddha aspect. Shraddha is synthesized with Yukti, with intelligence, one's reasoning capacity, again, which is sharpened to the greatest extent. And even there, the balance. In some place he says, Shruti matas tarkonu sandhiyatam. You need to follow the tarka, the reasoning, which is largely guided by the Shruti. And also you should be careful from kutarka. Kutarka is the sort of logical indulgence without having any reference points. The logic of convenience at times. Okay, one has to be careful from that, right? This is the care one needs to take in Yukti. And also see about the Shraddha also. I mean, this is the most beautiful aspect. Many of us do not realize the importance of these nuances of Shankara, right? When he says, Shruti, in some part, this is in one of the commentaries he uses this, Shrutis are like the mothers that take care of children. Whatever they do, whatever they say is in the benefit of the children, right? He says this statement in one of the commentary. At the same time, elsewhere he also mentions, Nahi Shruti Shatam Ghatam Pataitum Ishte, or that if Shruti tells me that what I see in front of me is not what it is, or rather, if I'm experiencing ghata, a pot in front of me, but the Shruti says it is a pata, a cloth, then I can't accept it. See, this is the balance. Where will you hold the Shruti? To what extent, or how will you have that reverential attitude, but also not let go of the logical thinking? This kind of balance, Shruti, Yukti, and all this, whether it is Shruti or Yukti, they are just the starters, the beginning points. Where does it need to culminate? It has to culminate in Brahma Jnanasya Anubhava Avasana. The end, Avasanatva, is where? Where is it? Where is it going to end? In one's own experience. So, laying the firm foundation of this entire edifice on experience. See, experience can never be negated. You can always argue. One logical argument can be countered with another logical argument. One statement of Shruti can be stretched to any extent, or you can quote another Shruti. But what cannot be debated, what cannot be disturbed, is what you understand by your own experience. There are conditions for it. When the Chitta Shuddhi has taken place, then there are many other conditions have been ensured, and then whatever is your experience, that rests with you. Shruti Yukti Anubhuti Bhihi. Again, this Shankara emphasizes through and through. If you look at the Mahavakyas that were identified, right? Which are the 4 Mahavakyas? The first one, Prajnanam Brahma. This is the Lakshana Vakya, the statement of definition. I mean, again, see, he identifies these 4 as the essential teachings of the Vedas and the Upanishads. Again, this is one point I'd like to make. Why does Shankara have this universal appeal? He has this universal appeal only because he was able to reach the most essential thing. Anyone who is able to reach the essential thing can pick up those gems which hold value cutting across space and time. And that's why Shankara is valuable to us even today. Going through the entire lot of the Vedic teaching, the Upanishadic teaching, he says these 4 statements are important. Which are these? The first one, the Lakshana Vakya, that is Prajnanam Brahma. Brahman is nothing but consciousness. Second, Upadesha Vakya, Tattvamasi, you are that. The teacher empowering a student with this statement that the Prajnanam that we are discussing is nothing but you. This is the second statement, the statement of instruction, Upadesha Vakya. Moving to the third one is Pratyabhijna Vakya, the statement of recognition. I am Atma Brahma. This is where the student gets into deep manana, introspection of how does this statement make sense to me? Brahman has these attributes. Shuddha, Nitya, Mukta, Buddha. It has all these attributes, and here I am, a helpless being, crying, incapable. All these are my attributes. Where do they match? How do they match? In what aspects do they match? In what aspects do they vary? Right? This kind of filtering one's own experience is Pratyabhijna, the statement of recognition. This is Manana aspect. And lastly, where does it all come to? Aham Brahmasmi, the statement of experience, experiential statement, Anubhava Vakya. You have 4 Vakyas. The first 2 belong to the Shravana category. Prajnanam Brahma, you define, and the teacher also defines first and says, you are that Brahman. This is where the student hears. This is Shravana, right? Shruti. And the next is Pratyabhijna, where you use your own logic, you use your own reasoning, you use your intellect to understand the sense that you can make out of this statement. That is Pratyabhijna Vakya. I am Atma Brahma. But all this, if it does not culminate in the highest, and which is that Aham Brahmasmi, it actually is incomplete. It's of no use, right? Therefore, the Anubhava Vakya, the Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana approach, which was again fortified by Shankara. Not that he brought them in for the first time, but nevertheless, he systematized them. Again here, see the balance, the way he synthesizes each one of them. And these are the essential truths that are required for all times, right? I need to have my Shraddha, I need to have my intellect, And finally, whatever I'm pursuing through my Shraddha and intellect should culminate in my experience. If this alignment is not there, then whatever I'm doing is a facade, is a false pretension to the world. Right? Again, each one of these, if you take his approaches, you will see the beauty, the way he established the highest truths of the Vedas. So in this manner, through all these approaches, I have few more aspects to delineate. Let me do it, but let me just complete this initial discussion. So through this strong foundation, he establishes that Ekam Sat, Brahma Satyam, Brahman alone is the reality of everything that exists. The Jagat Mithya is the secondary part. That is not his focus. That is not where his focus was on. His focus was on the point to say that everything is Brahman. Then if someone asks, okay, what about the world? He said, the world has a relative existence. In fact, this is a mistake that many people do. The word mitha means in Sanskrit relative. So mithya is relative. So Jagat Mithya means it's not it is not negating the existence of the world in its absolute sense. It is negating the world in the way it appears to be. So it has a relative existence, while Brahman has the absolute existence. So Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha, and every individual soul that you see, every individual being, irrespective of which yoni, which form one has, it doesn't matter. Everyone is Brahman alone. There's nothing else apart from Brahman. So these were the cardinal truths that he established without any ambiguity through the works of the commentaries on the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Brahma Sutra. Having done this, see, this is one aspect. Okay, you can call someone a genius because he's able to write these commentaries, but it did not end here. See, this was the ultimate framework, the deepest truth that he was able to bring it forth. And the work actually starts from this point onwards. That's where the beauty lies. So now there was a situation where there was the reality of the Upanishadic teaching on one side, and here you have people, common people, who are fighting amongst themselves about their traditions, about their practices, about their deities, about their gods. What do? Both of them are reality, right? You have one side the Upanishadic declaration, on the other side you have people. Can you negate the people here? No, you can't. This is reality. This is where this is ground zero. Perhaps someone would have said, no, you people are worshipping false gods. Shankara doesn't do that. You should also see his commentary in Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, people who are ignorant should not be shaken out of their slumber immediately. He is very careful. In that part, Shankara actually elaborates that even though you recognize people are not fully getting the truth of things, ajnanis, yet you have to help them through this path. So he's very clear on that. Therefore, here what he does, he brings in Panchayatana Puja Paddhati, right? Bringing all the 5 strands together, all these traditions. You have Shiva, Ganapati, Shakti, Vishnu, and Saura. So bringing them all together, he performs Panchayatana Puja Paddhati. In fact, this is what is holding Hinduism today. While for the people who want to have a form, you have a practice. Saguna is what appeals to you, right? Not negating, not saying you are worshipping false gods, not saying you are a kafir. No, this is not our approach. This is not the Indian thought. Your path is valid for you. Let me see how I can accommodate it. This is what Shankara does. He says, fine, you find solace in seeking your connection to the highest through this form. Let me see how I can have a system for it. Therefore, he devises Panchayatana Puja Paddhati for Saguna Upasaka, one who needs a formless, a form-filled form of worship. You have a path. For someone who doesn't need this, someone is a Nirguna Upasaka, you have a path. Right? Both are reconciled together because there is a higher truth behind. If it were not for that higher truth behind, you could not have reconciled. See, when you have two conflicting or two differentiating entities and they can't come together on that same level, what will you do? Either you let them to fight, because there is no way that they can have a compromise at that level. But if you're a visionary, if you're able to see through it, you can always take them one step behind to their source. If you take it to that level, then you can see some commonalities emerging. For that, you need to have that broader framework. So Advaita gives you that framework. With that Advaitic thought, you can hold Saguna and Nirguna, synthesize both of them. Within the Saguna, you can synthesize various traditions because each one is a manifestation of that same divinity. Ganapati is an expression, Shiva is an expression, Vishnu is an expression, Parvati is an expression, right? All these are expressions of one divinity. Therefore, they can have these forms, they can have any other forms. Therefore, they are valid. If you don't like Saguna, then also it's fine. You have your own Nirguna. So both of them will come together because there is an Advaitic framework. So synthesizing the Saguna and Nirguna, and within the Saguna, synthesizing various forms. If you feel like if you want to add few more traditions, please add to this. Instead of Panchayatana, you make it Shadayatana, you make it Saptayatana, you make it Ashtayatana, you make it Navayatana. It doesn't matter, right? You can bring them all together. This is the beauty of Shankara. I don't know if anyone else could have given us this kind of an approach, right? But this is not the only thing. The way he can synthesize things. I can go on with examples. I'll move on to the next part of it, right? The karma and jnana. Karma, jnana and bhakti. Jnana and bhakti. You should look into the commentaries of Shankara, especially in the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, there are a couple of chapters which debates this question, whether karma is better than jnana or jnana is better than karma. The second chapter, third chapter, fourth chapter, you have these discussions taking place. Well, we all are very clear as to where Shankara's purport is to say that to be liberated, it is knowledge. But in order to attain that knowledge, how do you attain? And that's where his beauty is all about. He's so clear. See, it is knowledge that liberates you. How? It's simple. We feel we are bound, right? And where is this bondage coming from? Bondage is coming from ignorance. Ignorance is darkness. If darkness has to be dispelled, what is the only solution? The only solution is knowledge. There is no other alternative to it. The moment light enters, the darkness recedes, right? So similarly, this bondage, this helplessness is being felt because of ignorance. And if ignorance is binding me, it's only the knowledge alone that liberates me. But in order to gain that knowledge, you can choose the path of Jnana Yoga, you can choose the path of Karma Yoga, you can choose the path of Bhakti Yoga. All these three will lead to knowledge. So therefore, in that way, you can actually put together all the three. There's no much difference. They all lead to one. In fact, this is the intent of Krishna also. If you look at the statements of Krishna, where he says, Chaturvidha bhajante mam, there are 4 kinds of bhaktas who reach out to me. Chaturvidha bhajante mam, jana sukritino arjuna, artaha jignasuhu artharthi jnani cha bharatarishabha. Bharatarishabha, hey Arjuna. These are the 4 kinds of bhaktas I have. Who are they? Artaha, one who is in trouble. Right? One who is in pain, one who is suffering. So he reaches out to me. He's also my bhakta. Then you have Artharthi, one who is seeking certain things in life, he also will reach out to me. Then you have Jignasu, one who is curious. What is this God principle? What does it do? How can I see it? Can I experience it? This kind of and one who is cognitively active. So this is Jignasu. He also reaches out to me. Then you have Jnani, the real knowledgeable person. See, see just these statements. There are 4 kinds of bhaktas. Of the 4 kinds of bhaktas, the last one is Jnani, and he say, Artho Jignasurattharthi Jnani cha Bharatarshapa. And the last one he says, Tu Atmaiva me matam. Jnani, I consider him to be my Atma himself. This is none other than me. Right? So, the way Krishna reconciles the Jnana and Bhakti, Shankara does the same thing. If you look into the commentaries of section 4, section 3, 4, and 2, there's Jnana and Karma, the places of them. And then also about Bhakti in the 12th chapter, this really emerges out. And even there, you should see the care he takes. He says, Karma is no doubt important. Again, there are a lot of misconceptions. People say, Shankara rejected karma altogether. No, Shankara knows the place of karma. He says karma is admissible till this point, but beyond this point, this is something else. So karma has a value in your life, jnana has a value in your life, bhakti has a jnana in your life. I mean, just see his own compositions. My God, what statements of ecstasy. If you come to his bhakti literature, if you come to his stotra sahitya, right? Kshama Devya Paradha Shiva Paradha Kshamapana Stotra, Devya Paradha Kshamapana Stotra. If you see each one of these stotras, the way he offers himself to the divinity in the form of Amba, in the form of Shiva, says Kwachidapi Kumata na Bhavati. Like there could be sons who have done mistakes, but a mother can never make a mistake. The way he earns for her blessings throughout this stotra is unimaginable. I mean, you would start wondering, can a man of such intellectual heights, can he have this power of bhakti? And that is exactly what Shankara is. He is a mountain, right? He can excel in this, he's excelled in the other. That's where the bhakti flows out of him. The way he can connect to the mother. I mean, that's what he displays in his own life. He was somewhere when his mother wanted him. He was back. He came and he comes and performs her last rites. Sannyasa, jnana on one side never stopped him from his sense of responsibility, that is karma, and his adoration and devotion for the mother, that is bhakti. And that is the synthesis of jnana, karma, and bhakti. He embodies this. I mean, the way he can write a logical commentary, look at his creative genius in the Stotra Sahitya and also in his own, in the commentary itself. I'm just feeling compelled to read this section out in the Kathopanishad. This is the commentary on the verse Urdhvamula avakshaka eshoshvatta sanatanaha tadeva shukram tad brahma tadeva amrita muchyate. So this commentary, I mean, this is a verse that is there in the Kathopanishad, which describes the inverted tree imagery, which is a very common imagery across various texts. The same verse with a slight change appears in the Bhagavad Gita 15th chapter also. While explaining this, the poetic genius comes out of Shankara. The way he plays with the words just to describe the Ashwatha Vriksha. What is this Ashwatha tree? What are its leaves? What are its branches? What are its roots? What are its twigs? What are the birds that rest there? What are the various sounds that comes from the ruffles of the leaves? I mean, he unleashes his poetic genius in this part, and that too in the form of prose. I'm just compelled to read this out. If you might understand some words here there, but just listen to the beauty of these sounds. He says, Vrakshascha Vrashchanat. It is called Vriksha because it will be cut one day. And what kind of tree is it? Janma jara marana shokadyaneka anarthatmakaha pratikshanam anyata swabhavaha, which changes every minute. Maya mari judaka gandharva nagaradivat drishta nashta swarupatvat avasanecha vrikshavat abhavatmakaha kadali stambhavan nissaraha. Aneka shata pakhanda buddhi vikalpaspadaha tattva vijignyasubhi anirdharita idam tattvaha Vedanta nirdharita parabrahma moola saraha avidya kama karma avyakta bija prabhavaha parabrahma vijnana kriya shakti dvayatmaka hiranyagarbhankuraha sarva prani linga bheda skandha trishna jalavaseko darpaha buddhindriya vishaya pravalankuraha shruti smriti nyaya vidyopadesha palashaha Yajnadana tapadyanek kriyasu pushpa. He's explaining what is its pushpa, the flower is, what are the twigs. I mean, everyone is giving a series of adjectives to explain that part. I'm not going to the meanings, but just playing, I mean, enjoying the words and the sound of it. Sukha dukkha vedana aneka rasa. What is that sap inside? Sukha dukkha vedana, the pleasure and pain of life. The multitude of these experiences, that is the sap of this tree. Pran upajivana anantapala Krishna salila salilavaseka prarudha jadikrita drida baddha moolaha satya namadi saptaloka brahmadi bhuta pakshikrita nidaha. And that tree also has some nests built by some birds, and it also is being explained there what they are. And then he says, and just this one word runs a few lines, okay? Prani sukha dukkhodbhuta harsha shoka jata nritya geeta vaditra kshvelita aspotita hasita krishta rudita haha muncha munchetyaadyaneka shabdakrita tumuli bhuta maharavaha vedanta vihita brahmatma darshana sanga shasta kritochchedaha Yeshaha samsara vrikshaha. I mean, what is this samsara vriksha that Ashwatha represents? Okay, so beautifully he brings about the imagery, and the moment you read it, it just emerges in front of your eyes as though that is the reality that you can experience and see in front of you. He creates that world through words in front of us. That is Shankara, who can play with prose, who can play with poetry. I mean, such intoxicating poetry has come out of him. All of us get connected to the Nirvana Shatka, right? Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham. Just these words are good enough to bring us that experience within, right? So whether it's beauty or whether it's prose, whether it's logic or whether it's Shraddha and Bhakti, Shankara can synthesize everything together. None other than Shankara can play in such format. The Tikshnata and the Lalitya. Tikshnata is the razor sharp intellect, right? And the precise usage of the language on one side, and on the other side, Lalitya, that is the beauty, that is the embellishment, both he can bring together. So in this manner, Shankara is the greatest synthesizers of various aspects: karma, jnana, karma, bhakti, tarka, shraddha, saguna, nirguna, within saguna, the different strands of thought, shruti, yukti, anubhuti. I mean, you can go on and just stand in front of this magnanimous or majestic creation of God. I mean, what has he left us behind? And you cannot stop wondering at this entire edifice that is there. So in this manner, you read Shankara. Of course, whatever he has to offer in terms of philosophy, that is good and fine. I mean, many have spoken about it, but as a synthesizer, I really hold him in such high pedestal that no one can come anywhere close to that. We have people, great people, genius people who have born in this country and they have excelled in one or the other aspect. But if you have to identify one person who brings together all these things together, that is Shankara. And that is possible because of Advaita, the one in many, right? If you can get to that essence, everything else becomes that play, that leela of that one. And Shankara is precisely bringing about that leela in every aspect, whether it's through his intellect, whether through his work. I mean, see this, it is so important. People say he did not value karma. No, that is not the case. What did he do in his life? He traveled across the country. He saw certain tendencies which he said this may not be helpful for the sustaining of the society in the long run. Therefore, we need to change this. This was his pain point. Ko Vedanuddharishyati. Who will uphold the values of the Vedas? I will do it. He took it upon himself, traveled across the country, not just once, but 4 times. He established 4 institutions. I mean, we can never underestimate the contribution of Shankara in establishing these institutions in 4 corners of this country. I'll tell you why. Today we see institutions. Our oldest institutions are some of the old, some universities which might have 300 years, 400 years. But here you have institutions which have stood the test of time for 1200 years. Unimaginable. If one can found an institution which can last for 1200, 1300, 1400 years, just imagine the vision of that person, right? That is Shankara, who could see the requirements of that day and who could see to build an institution which can contribute effectively even after 1200, 1400 years after a millennia, right? That is Shankara. The requirements of now, requirements of later, bringing them together through the institutions. So take any aspect of Shankara, you cannot but marvel at him. We are indeed blessed to be able to connect to such an idea called Shankara, to remember him, to just to know about him, and also say we belong to that tradition which has given Shankara to the world. Give me any strand of thought which cannot be accommodated in the Advaitic framework. There's not a single thought that cannot be accommodated, right? I mean, just look at the progress of the darshanas, starting from Charvaka Darshana up to the Advaita Vedanta, the way he sees this whole development and gives us the cream of this journey in the form of Advaitic thought, which brings everything to its fold. And the balance he brings about. I'll just give one example and maybe conclude after this. There is a sutra in the Brahma Sutra text called Etena Yoga Pratyuktaha. By this, we discard yoga. Many people are shocked. What does it mean? I mean, does Vedanta reject yoga? And then how do we claim or how do we say that yoga is such an important contribution because Vedanta has rejected it? No, this is not the right understanding of the text. If you look into that Bhashya part, Shankara very clearly says what aspect of yoga he is rejecting. He says there are 2 things. One, yoga comes from the Samkhyan framework. Samkhya has 2 problems according to Shankara. One is, it is a system of duality. Ultimately, there are 2 absolute realities, Purusha and Prakriti. And logically, he is able to say that there cannot exist 2 absolute realities. It has to be one, and other one could be a subset of the one. Okay, I don't want to go into the logical details of it, but let me refrain at this point. So there cannot be 2 absolute realities. There could be one absolute reality, and the other one could be a relative reality. Therefore, this is one fallacy of Sankhya. And the second one is that it attributes the entire creation to Prakriti, which she herself is non-intelligent. So According to the Advaita Vedantic or the Vedanta, these two are the fallacies of Sankhya philosophy. And yoga belongs to the Sankhyan framework. Therefore, we reject yoga also along with Sankhya, and we have amply proved why Sankhya does not hold the test of philosophical reasoning. So he says that. But in the same place, he also says the aspects of sadhana of yoga, the part of yoga which focuses on sadhana part, the part of yoga which helps you to reach to your supreme self, the Purusha who is Shuddha, Nitya, Mukta, Buddha, that aspect we hold it dearly. This is balance. What do I reject? What do I hold? I don't reject it in its entirety. There is so much value that Sankhya and Yoga can bring in. I'm retaining that. But what doesn't stand the test of the reasoning, I'm rejecting it. Right? This balance, this is again Shankara. So in this manner, he is an embodiment of synthesis, the greatest synthesizer of all times. And in order to appreciate this, one has to read Shankara. There is no other alternative. And I urge you, no doubt, the beginning could be through translations, beginning could be through his Prakarana Granthas, beginning could be through Stotra Sahitya, but you have to come to the commentary, and especially the Upanishad commentary and the Bhagavad Gita commentary. Brahma Sutra is also equally good, but that appeals more for someone who really has that cognitive thrust, that taste for the play of reason. Otherwise, to enjoy the essence of Shankara, these two would be quite helpful. And that you have to read it in the original. And for that, you need to foray into study of Sanskrit. I think that's where we can all begin with. So with these words, once again, going down to that mountain, Shankara, I conclude my words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vinayji. That was a brilliant exposition on the synthesis of what a master synthesizer he was, and very clearly taking what is valuable in a particular idea and rejecting what is not, keeping in line with the absolute truth. And that quote, that passage that you read from Kathopanishad was really brilliant. He's not just a philosopher, but he's almost like a poet, the way he wields the language and the ideas. Thank you so much. We do have some questions here, and I'll just take them. Okay, Raghavanji is asking a question like, why Dharmic Hindutva is not able to appreciate Shankara philosophy today? That's his question.
Sorry, can you please state it again?
He's saying that why some Hindus are not able to appreciate Shankara's philosophy. That's the essence of what he's saying.
I think, we appreciate or we value something only when we know it. So awareness about Shankara, this was the very purpose of Advaita Academy to come into existence. Because Hari Kiran ji, the founder, felt that Shankara is not well known. But eventually he also realized it's not just Shankara, but the Indian thought in general is not well known. Therefore, we need to have Indica Academy. I think it's the ignorance. People don't know. Reverence is there to some extent, but to understand what he has done, somehow it has been cut off from the collective memory. Of course, through the Matha Sampradayas, from the house Sampradayas, it continues, but through an institutional manner, through our schooling, through our education, through formal institutions, we have lost that connections. And hopefully through our emerging interest in Sanskrit, emerging interest in the Indian knowledge systems, I think we should revisit Shankara again and again. If someone can lead the path on harmony, not just bringing together the Indian thought, but the entire world also together, that is possible only in the light of the Vedantic thought, and there is no other alternative to it.
one more question that Arava Mudan has asked, and he says that karma and bhakti are the basis for ultimate wisdom and knowledge. Is this, I mean, he's asking if that is what it is.
Yes and no, in the sense that they all help in Chitta Shuddhi. They are not the direct causes for liberation. Not karma and not just jnana at the ordinary level. But all these will lead to Chitta Shuddhi, through which true knowledge emerges. And by true knowledge, I mean the experiential knowledge of Brahmahamasmi. So this is experiential knowledge, and this is what liberates us. So it is the true knowledge that liberates, and true knowledge is attained through Chitta Shuddhi, which is made possible through Jnana path, Karma path, Bhakti path. All will lead us to this point.
Thank you so much, Vinayji, for that wonderful explanation. And we look forward to having more sessions with you. Dear viewers, we have more sessions in the final week of the festival. I'd like to announce what's coming up tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Swami Tattvamayananda will be talking about Jagan Mithyatvam, the Advaita doctrine that Jagat is Mithya. So please do tune in at 7 a.m. India time. See you then. Thank you and goodbye.